What do this train and this train have in common? They're 3,000 miles apart. Well, more than you think. Let's dive into the history. Though this video is about trains in California, we're starting in Washington, D.C., specifically on the National Mall, the strip of land famous for being lined with monuments and the Smithsonian Museum. If you're ever just sitting here between all the museums in Washington, D.C., and you look around, you see all the history, all the culture, and you think to yourself, the one thing that's missing, the one thing that would make this complete, is an artifact of California Railroad history. Well, first, I want to meet you because I want to understand how your brain works. But also, you're in luck. Follow me. All right, we're at the National Museum of American History, one of the many amazing free Smithsonian museums here in Washington, D.C. There's tons of great exhibits in here, but one of them is my favorite. And if you've been here before, you can probably already guess which one. You have to go down the stairs to the room with a big old train in front. It is the America on the Move exhibit in the Hall of Transportation. Now, this hall has all the modes of transportation that have played a role in American history, but since trains played such a prominent role in this history, they also have a prominent place in this exhibit. And you know what the crazy thing is? A lot of the trains and transit vehicles on display here, they might not have been here. There were Smithsonian officials that wanted to just scrap them because they thought the public can't be interested in these obsolete pieces of machinery. But the thing is, the museum was built around a lot of these big, heavy trains, so they were spared. And now look at the amazing exhibits. But really, the first big train you see when you enter the exhibit is this red steam locomotive that looks like it came straight out of a Western film. This is the Jupiter, built by Baldwin not too far away in Philly. It dates back to 1876, and it was used quite far away, in Santa Cruz, California. Just 2 years earlier, in 1874, the Santa Cruz Railroad opened a 21-mile, narrow-gauge line between Watsonville and Santa Cruz. Watsonville was on the Southern Pacific. The line was built to narrow gauge to be cheaper. By the way, if you've ever wondered why American locomotives looked like this and not like how they did in other parts of the world, it's because after the Civil War, so many railroads got built so quickly that the rails were often very uneven. So the shape of the engine and the small wheels were used to stabilize trains. Anyway, in 1880, a competitor arrived in Santa Cruz. The South Pacific Coast Railroad offered a faster route between Santa Cruz and San Francisco. So the original railroad lost a lot of money. So much so that they suspended service and were sold to the Southern Pacific. They converted the tracks to standard gauge and began running service again. But this did make the narrow gauge locomotive obsolete. So they shipped the Jupiter down to Guatemala in 1883, where it hauled bananas and coffee. How did it end up here? Well, a man named O'Roy Chalk, wait, him again? Yes, the businessman who, among other companies, owned the streetcars in Washington, D.C., he owned the company that owned the Jupiter, and he had it shipped to D.C. He did this in the 1960s, and the Smithsonian bought it in 1976. But since this train is displayed in the Museum of American History, surely the whole line is history, right? Well, not really. The rails are still there, and they're used by freight trains. And while passenger rail service to Santa Cruz ended decades ago, there's a small part of the line that you can still ride. So let's go to Santa Cruz now. The way to do that by public transportation today is to take the train to San Jose first. At San Jose, right in front of the railway station, you can transfer to the Highway 17 Express bus service. This will drop you off in Santa Cruz. A popular attraction in Santa Cruz is the boardwalk. We're here now. On the one hand, there are roller coasters and spinny things and log rides, but then on the other hand, in the middle of the street, we find a train? This is the Big Trees and Pacific Railroad, a tourist train that forms part of the Roaring Camp Railroad's network. The beach train, as it's also known as, takes passengers from the Santa Cruz Boardwalk up to Felton. For the majority of that journey, it uses tracks built by the South Pacific Coast, that company that brought down the Santa Cruz Railroad. But for a very brief portion of its route at the boardwalk, it uses the line that was initially built by the Santa Cruz. So technically, we can say that the train in this footage uses tracks that the train in this footage also used. Sort of. But there may be a future in which this line is used for more than just a tourist train and some local freight. There are serious talks about converting it back to a fully functioning passenger railway. The Zero Emission Passenger Rail and Trail project seeks to take the Santa Cruz Railroad right-of-way and build both a bicycle pedestrian trail and a modern passenger railroad. The train line would branch off from the Pajaro-Watsonville station that is proposed to be built as part of the Caltrain extension to Salinas. I'm showing clips of Caltrain because to me it seems logical to run it as a branch of Caltrain, but you know, this is passenger rail in California, so probably there will be a whole separate agency created to run this train. It started in 2012, when the Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Commission bought the right-of-way from Union Pacific. That's when they began a series of studies, but there was a snag. A cool, futuristic-looking snag. Coast Futura. This plan would see custom-built hydrogen light rail vehicles running from Capitola to Davenport. There was even a real-life demonstration. And while Coast Futura had the backing of the Friends of the Rail and Trail lobbying group, it did not enjoy similar support from the Regional Transportation Commission. They released a borderline petty document ripping into TIGM, the company who built the trams. Same company, by the way, who built the hydrogen streetcars in Aruba and the trams at the Grove in LA, if you've seen those videos. From unflattering photos of its CEO and a comment about how their staff is as large as your typical Starbucks, to more substantial critiques like the fact that TIGM had absolutely no experience running trains this distance, the fact that it wouldn't go to Watsonville, or that it's unfair for taxpayers to fund millions of dollars worth of infrastructure upgrades for a private company to benefit from. Dang, why don't we apply that logic more? Anyway, the Coast Futura project kind of sizzled out, but soon another potential obstacle came up. Measure D. This measure, put up to a vote in Santa Cruz County, would scrap all efforts to restore passenger rail and exclusively build a trail. But thankfully, Measure D failed in a landslide. 70% voted to reject it. And so trains are back on the menu. The Regional Transportation Commission hired a consulting firm in 2023 to begin the project concept report, and then they asked for public feedback in 2024. More information about the design will be released this summer. At least that's what the schedule says. Most of the line is already publicly owned. Eventually, they want half-hourly peak service and hourly daytime service in both directions. But it won't be easy. Many of the 30-plus bridges along the route need to be replaced. So since we can expect more information this summer, when can we expect construction to begin? In May of 2032. Yeah, modern passenger rail in Santa Cruz is still years away. Who knows how many more times I'll have visited the Smithsonian in the meantime. If you enjoyed this video or learned something new, please consider subscribing to Trains Are Awesome. Thank you so much for watching today. We'll see you next time.